So one of the questions I get a lot on social media and in person is, how do I choose a rod? And I do several different things. You know, there's a lot of rods that are labeled technique specific, but the problem is everybody's different. I'm going to use rods maybe a little different than you, and you need to choose a rod that fits the way that you fish, your height. When I say that, you know, I'm taller, so I can get away with some shorter rods, you know, having to cast and stuff like that. So you want to pick what's comfortable and what fits you in a technique. You know, when I go into a store or, you know, at Falcon and I'm going to start playing with rods, there's really three ways to do it. One, you know, you can do the old bend the tip thing and kind of see the flex of the rod. This bottom section is kind of what I call the backbone. The top is the tip section, and then this is the midsection. So say I'm choosing, this is a square bill here. Say I'm choosing a rod for a square bill. I personally want a rod that has a little bit of backbone. It just helps cast it better, and also it helps, you know, load up on that fish. You know, but I want some flex in that tip to be able to fight them with treble hooks. And you notice this is kind of parabolic, like it bends all the way back to the backbone section here. So this rod right here would be a pretty good square bill rod. This would not be a good flipping rod for me. There's just too much flex in the whole rod. So that's one way you can check it. You know, a lot of guys like to do the tip test like this. I would rather do it without a reel on it, but the reel gives you weight, almost like a fish. So you can actually, you get the same bend as you do bending it, you know, on the floor there. You know, you can just see how it pretty much just tapers all the way into the backbone. So that would be a rod that I would want to use for treble hooks. Another way to test it, you know, simply if you have a bait on there, you know, you can do the same thing. All three show you the same bend of the rod. Now, obviously in a store, if you're looking at rods, you're not going to have a reel on there, you're not going to have a bait, and that's one of the things that I like to do whenever I'm testing rods. You know, I go in, I feel them, I do the tip test, whatever, but really before I 100% make my decision, I want to put a reel on it, I want to put a bait on it, and most of all, I want to catch a fish on it to make sure the rod loads the way that I want it to load. You know, and every action is different. You know, this is a jerkbait rod, so, you know, I want it to bend even more. I'm going to throw this a lot in the wintertime, so those fish aren't going to fight hard. It's easy on me. It's a shorter rod, but you can just see it's got a lot more flex even than the crankbait rod. You know, you get into something like single hooks, spinnerbaits, bladed jigs. That's where I want more power. You know, I'm fishing around laydowns, grass, and stuff like that. So I want more power, and you get power from this area right there, the backbone into that midsection. Notice when I bend that, you see it's got some tip. What that tip does is it lets me be more accurate in casting. It doesn't wear me out. But also it lets that fish, when that fish takes the bait, you know, it lets him have it a little bit. You know, and I get a lot better hook sets and stuff using a rod that has some tip. I've tried different kinds, stiffer rods with this, and I always fall back on one that, you know, that has a little bit of tip. Even, you know, 7-8 pounders, I have no problem landing them with a rod that has a soft tip. Actually, I think it does better because it just lets them get the bait better. And as hard, you know, if you're like me and you set the hook pretty hard, something has to give. You don't want your line to give, which I never have an issue with. Something has to give. And if your rod's a broomstick and your line doesn't give, then what's going to give is that fish's mouth. And you don't want that. So something has to flex whenever you set the hook. Now this is a flipping rod. This is actually I've used this same rod for years and years. You're going to notice I mean, like imagine I'm flipping in the bushes, I'm flipping in the docks, I got to get them out. Not a lot of tip. There is still some, just from being able to load the bait, and like you said, you got to have something that gives. So that's why the tip, and you can see the only thing that gives is from the top eye to the top of the midsection. Only the tip is bending there. So that's pretty much how I kind of choose them with fluorocarbon. Now you get in the braided line, and pretty much my rule is whatever I would use that rod for on fluorocarbon, I'm going to back up an action. So if I'm using a heavy on flipping, if I'm going to flip with braid, I'm going to back up to a medium heavy. If I'm using a medium heavy with fluoro, I'm going to back up to a medium. And the reason being is braid is just so, it does not move, it does not stretch. Something has to give. This is my topwater rod. You know, it's treble hooks. It's a really, really soft rod because the braid does all of the work. So, you know, all through the line, just remember, if you're going to use braid, you're going to pick a rod. You can do the same test, but for me personally, I want something lighter, more flex, so I don't tear that lure out of that fish's mouth. So there you go. I appreciate you guys riding along.